How should you handle uncaught exceptions in your Next.js applications? Well, that's what we're going to cover here, and we're going to cover how to use error boundaries to handle this, both kind of a root error boundary as well as nesting error boundaries. So a lot of this information is going to come from this article on the Next.js docs, which I will link below, but effectively, it covers how to handle uncaught exceptions or exceptions that are unexpected errors that indicate bugs or issues that should not occur during the normal flow of your application. And you should handle these by throwing errors, which will then be caught by error boundaries. So how do you actually do this? Well, let's go to my running Next.js application here. We have this dashboard component that is just like a normal dashboard component. It is exactly what you see on this page here, but we're going to throw an exception within this dashboard component. And the way that we're going to do that is that we are going to render this error component, because this error component, it basically just throws an error, an uncaught exception, and then it returns basically nothing. So when I render this within my page, it's going to throw this uncaught exception. So the way that we can handle this is by using error boundaries, and we do that by adding an error.tsx or tsx file and kind of capture that error. Now, for this, it's going to have to be a client component. The error.file is going to need to be a client component, and you're going to be passed a couple of values automatically to this error component. You're going to get an error prop as well as a reset function. So Next.js is automatically passing you the error and a way to kind of reset your page. So in our component here, we just console.error the error, and we're going to run that anytime there's a new error. And then we're going to have a something went wrong as well as a button that has an on click that calls this reset. So importantly, this error page here, it is going to handle any uncaught exceptions that are thrown within this dashboard route segment. So error is going to wrap around this page here within our dashboard, but it's also going to wrap around any nested routes within our dashboard route segment. So any errors thrown within dashboard, nested dashboard, it's going to bubble up to error.tsx here. Now, if we wanted to handle errors kind of at the root of our application in our app directory here, we could also add an error.tsx file, and that would handle errors within any of our route segments. Now, Next.js also has a more uncommon pattern here to where we could handle uncaught errors in the root layout with global-error.js. But since that's pretty uncommon, we're not going to kind of handle it that way. We're just going to kind of focus on using error.js error boundaries here. But just know it is a thing that you could do using global-error.js. All right, so adding an error.file is going to add an error boundary for that entire route segment. So if I throw an error here within my dashboard page, by commenting this in, we should see this component get rendered to the page. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's comment this error component into the page here. Now, if we come back, we do see something went wrong. Try again, which tries to kind of refresh the page. It's not going to do anything here in this example, but if you actually had an uncaught exception, it might help. But here we see something went wrong. It matches our error boundary here if something went wrong. Let's check the console and see if we console logged the error like we should. And we do see we console.error from our error boundary here. So that's looking good, but we can kind of take this further to where if we go into our nested route segment here, you see that I added another error.tsx file. So what you can do here is that you can add specific error boundaries to every route segment. So if we wanted to have a different error page for our dashboard page that we do for our nested dashboard page, so this is going to be /dashboard/nested. If we want a different error page for this dashboard here, we can just add an error.file to this nested folder. And that's what we do. This error component looks basically the same as our last one, but you see that it has something went wrong in your nested component, just so we can tell the difference. So you can have several different error boundaries and handles specific uncaught exceptions within any of your route segments by just adding this error.file. So this error.file is going to apply to this page.tsx that's within our nested route segment here. So if I go to our nested page and we throw this error component here, what we should see is if I go to /dashboard and we see /dashboard is still this something went wrong error boundary. So it's still this error boundary here, which is what we'd expect. But if we go to our nested error boundary here, so nested, you see something went wrong in your nested component. And that is because we're at dashboard /nested. So we're at this page right here. We throw this error, but since we have an error.tsx within our nested folder, this is going to capture that uncaught exception, or this is going to trigger this error boundary, and it's not going to bubble up to our error.tsx. So that's why we see something went wrong in your nested component. But if I remove this file and we just delete this altogether, what you're going to see is that we throw this uncaught exception within our nested, but since we don't have an error boundary in our nested, that's going to bubble up to our next error boundary. So it's going to go to this dashboard error.tsx. So now we should see something went wrong. And if we come back, we do see we're still at dashboard nested, but it bubbled up to our dashboard error boundary. So for your error boundaries or handling uncaught exceptions in React, you can add an error.file, and you can read more about this in their docs, but a couple of the props that they're going to pass you are error and a reset function to where you could do whatever you want to do with that error that is passed or that error that was an uncaught exception. And then you can try to reset the page here. But this error.file is going to catch all uncaught exceptions that occur within that certain route segment. So if we added this error.tsx file just to our app directory, it would catch all uncaught exceptions throughout our entire application. But since we added it to our dashboard route segment here, it's only going to catch uncaught exceptions within our dashboard route segment. So /dashboard /nested. If we had another route and it is /dashboard /nested /settings, that error would still bubble all the way up to this error.tsx page. But you still can create specific error.files within nested routes. And then if an uncaught exception occurs in those nested pages, that error boundary is what's going to show for those uncaught exceptions. So you can really customize your error boundary components for those specific pages if you would like. So hopefully that gives you a really good idea of how to use error boundaries in Next.js. It really does follow a similar pattern to kind of the file specific routing that occurs in Next.js. So hopefully that makes sense. But if you do have any questions, just let me know down in the comments below. So thanks for tuning into this, and I'll see you in that next one.